We're so excited to be doing this presentation here as part of our Keeping the Room series. This is the second on the project after Elizabeth Freeman, the untold story of the Black community of Sheffield. We're so delighted to have several of our researchers here today. And we have a special guest here as well, Representative Smitty Pignatelli, who's sitting to my left. I know he doesn't want to be recognized, wants to sit in the background, but Smitty is a special friend of the society, and we certainly welcome him to us today. I'm going to introduce Aretha Whitehead over in the corner there. Aretha's our new administrator, been on the job 5-6 weeks or so, and has hit the ground running and doing a fantastic job. So she's going to take it from here. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm very, very thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be around all of the folks that are here and all the folks who've been doing this research. I've been getting to know Jim and Beth, and it's just a joy being able to work in such an environment of historical curiosity and everything else that comes along with that. So I just have some introductions. So we have our archivist, Jim Miller. He has run the Society's Mark Dewey Family History and Research Center for over 2 decades. He has assisted people researching their family histories, professional and academic researchers, and those interested in the Sheffield story. His book, Early Life in Sheffield, Berkshire County, Massachusetts, a biography of its ordinary people from settlement to 1860, is the definitive source on Sheffield history, and he regularly writes articles on that subject. Confronted with the dearth of information on Sheffield's Black residents, he established a genealogical database which now contains over 18,000 names linked to that community. He has intimate knowledge of the Society's collection of government, tax, mercantile, and media records, as well as primary source materials in other institutions and government offices, and has professional relationships with regional historical societies, organizations, and institutions, as well as local historians. We're very, very lucky to have Jim. And Beth has worked as freelance historical and genealogical researcher for over 25 years. She serves as a town historian for Egremont, Massachusetts, where her roots are, and where she currently resides. She has previously served as assistant historian on the board of the Mayflower Society of Virginia. Beth and her husband have lived in Alexandria, Virginia for the past 30 years, where they raised 5 children and a number of cats. And we have Nicholas J. Ayeta, is the current chair of the Westfield State University History and Philosophy Department, as well as a member of the City of Westfield Historical Commission. At Westfield State, Dr. Ayeta teaches courses on early American history, Native American history, the American West, and methodology. He also serves as program coordinator for students interested in becoming public middle and high school teachers. A native of Massachusetts, Dr. Ayeta attended the College of the Holy Cross, the University of Connecticut, and the University of Nebraska. He taught and worked in Boston, Medford, Lincoln, Nebraska, Nashville, Tennessee, and Los Angeles, California, prior to returning to New England at Westfield State University. In spring 2023, Dr. Ayeta was in his first performance with the Westfield Theater Group, portraying, appropriately enough, Thomas Jefferson in 1776, the musical. And our final esteemed guest, Jocelyn Jones Arnold, is a Philadelphia-based researcher and historian who loves nothing more than digging through her family archives to uncover stories of their bravery, struggles, and triumphs. Her research into her ancestry gives her an unending sense of strength and pride, and her fascination with their perseverance fuels her desire to share untold stories of other Black American and Indigenous people with the world. Jocelyn's passion was sparked by the recent discovery of her 4th great-grandfather, Jethro Jones, 1733 to 1823, a free African American master toolmaker who served 6 years of honorable service in the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War. Having enlisted out of Worcester, Mass., Jethro's bravery and spirit of patriotism was passed along to generations of Joneses residing through the Commonwealth, including his grandson, William Jones from Sheffield, and great-grandsons, Henry Jones and Samuel S. Jones from Pittsfield. Each were veterans of the esteemed 54th Mass Regiment. The Jones family history of military service ended with Jocelyn's father, Chester C. Jones, a Cambridge-born Harvard graduate who served in the Korean War. Jocelyn considers herself a connector and history teller and aims to educate, build community, and spark joy through her work. It took an Ancestry.com membership and a global pandemic for me to discover 300 years of bravery and sacrifice in my Berkshire County Jones family. To know their names and to learn of their faith and values is humbling, and it helps me understand who I am and why I am here. I had never thought I could trace my lineage beyond a few generations. So this discovery has opened me up to what I feel is a river of love that I never even knew existed. I am forever changed and forever grateful, in her words.
So most of today is going to be hearing about Jocelyn's research and the connections with Sheffield. We're going to do a little bit of illustration where we'll be using the dock camera here to throw images up on the screen, so folks out in Zoom land as well as in the room will be able to see it better. What we'll try to do is go for about not quite 15 minutes initially, pause for some questions and pick up with some other information as needed, but it will be a relatively flow-driven event based on questions not only in the room, but potentially out in the electronic world. So I'm going to zoom a little bit for our main speaker, because I'm not the main one talking. No worries, you'll be fine.
I'm gonna look here for all the history.
Oh, all right. So, Jocelyn, take it away.
So, hello, I really am honored and so appreciative to be here. I've never spoken about my family like this before, and as I alluded to, this history that I've learned is very new to me. So I am from so my family is from Massachusetts. Both of my parents are from, my mother was from Boston, my father was from Cambridge. My brother and I were both born in Washington, D.C., and our family moved to Philadelphia in the early 70s, where I currently reside. Growing up, all I knew about my family was that my brother and I had essentially no cousins, no real family members. Everyone was older. But one thing I did know was that there was a family connection to W.E.B Dubois, again through my father, who his father, Chester Chauncey Jones, was born in Pittsfield. And I also knew that there was a connection to the 54th through Samuel S. Jones, who was my grandfather's uncle, my great uncle, who we lived with for a while. And I knew that he served in the 54th, and that there was somebody was on in some sort of 54 memorial or marker somewhere around, but that honestly was all I knew. My father had been estranged from his father until about the 80s. And when he did get connected to him, they did stay in touch throughout for the rest of my grandfather's life. Fortunately, the Joneses have lived quite a long life. My grandfather, I think, passed away at 92. And when one of the last times my father met with his father, he asked about who his parents were and where they were from. And this was actually what started my journey on Ancestry.com. My father actually went to the National Archives, I think it was, I can't remember, it was in the 80s, so it was before internet, and actually was able to find a copy of the marriage certificate of what were his grandparents, Frank Jones and Kitty Gilliard, both of Pittsfield. Frank was a waiter at the Hotel Wendell, apparently in Pittsfield. I've never been. This is honestly, being here, which I arrived yesterday, is my first time ever in Western Massachusetts, first time in Berkshire County, which when you hear how deep the family runs, it's kind of strange that it took me this long, but at least I'm here. So this document was the very first, it was one of the very first documents I put into Ancestry when I started my family. I'd never heard of the Gilliards. I'd never knew who Chauncey was. And if you see down there, the person who married them was actually Samuel Harrison. At the time, these were all names, great to know, didn't really know the context or much about it. And quite honestly, as an African American, you really sort of, it was never a part of my desire to search for my history because I didn't think there was anything to find. I knew that there would be a backstop that was sort of something hard and difficult to deal with, and I didn't really want to find that. However, when my father passed away in 2002, and I remembered that I had this document and Ancestry had come up, I was like, well, let me just get on to see. And I found some things, but you know, with Ancestry, they update the system every now and again, so there wasn't a lot of information at the time. Long story short, in 2020, in COVID, quarantine, sick of looking at all the COVID stats and all that crazy stuff, and I said, let me just get back on here and see what's going on, if there's any update. And funny enough, one of the first hints that came up was a link to an article out of Blandford about the Hilltown hikers, how they had come across an old map of Blandford, and that had, you know, that was named Enward Hill Road. And they did the research and said, wait, what is the history of the name of this road? And they went on to find that Jethro Jones had lived there, that he was a free African American who served for 6 years in the Continental Army. He was also a master toolmaker. He was an apprentice to, is it Francis Nicholson, who's considered sort of like the first colonial toolmaker and furniture maker here. And sorry, I could go on forever about this because it's really exciting, but I learned about Jethro and his existence and his service, and that he had served at Valley Forge. He was honorably discharged from at West Point by General Knox. And we have a copy of that, the paperwork. I have a copy of his pension letter where he attests to the fact that he was present at the Battle of Monmouth, where he fought alongside General around Lafayette. Was he?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Thank you. I'm still learning this. I'm like, now that it's sort of part of my history, I'm like, this is exciting. I want to talk about it all the time. But he was also present at the Battle of Saratoga, where, you know, for the taking of Burgoyne. Jethro went on to have several children, including my third great grandfather, Hakaliah, who was born in Blandford but moved to Sheffield in 1820. Should I cut it back?
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Trying to use hand signals to get all that.
Sorry. It's a lot of information, and honestly, like I said, I've never spoken about this before, but it's something that, as you've heard, really sort of speaks to my soul, and I can't stop talking about it. Quite honestly, you can see. But my third grandfather, Hakaliah, was born in Blandford, but moved to Sheffield in 1820, and lived here for at least a decade. He's actually listed on the Carter G. Woodson has a list of free Negro heads of household from 1830s, and Hakaliah and his brother Jethro are both listed as, you know, free here in 1830. And Hakaliah's son, William Jones, was a lifelong resident of Sheffield, and was a member of the 54th. And actually, William, like Jethro, enlisted in the Civil War at age 45, which was how old Jethro was when he enlisted in the Continental Army. Yeah. And Jethro had also served in the French Indian War as well, which that sort of service, it makes me feel like, what was it that made him want to go back to continue to contribute? And how does he feel about sort of the country that he fought to create? And as we talk about this, and again, I can talk about this forever, but maybe we can have a second session. But I just really want to be clear that this is our history. This is not just my history. It's not Black history. It's the history of the country that we share, and it's history that we all share. And I just feel it's important to be able to highlight these stories, because they just have been untold for so long that I'm so grateful that Jim and Paul actually were able to reach out to me, connect with me, which only happened earlier this year, to invite me to be a part of this project. Because it is something that on my own I would not have been able to discover. And I truly believe, and I can explain what the experience we had yesterday, and these folks are really like family to me now. So.
Can we switch back to the camera for a second? We're gonna, so we're up with that background on the family story, we're up to just at the mid 1860s. And so we've sort of taken the journey back. And as Jocelyn mentioned, the idea of the backstop on family that's something many of us face when we do research, but particularly for African Americans, there is kind of a sense of where am I going to run into the wall? And in this case, you kept finding more, which is really, really important. And once Jim and Paul made the connection, we were able to start to piece together where are the Jones family residents here of Sheffield with all these other stories. So for where we are, we're currently right about here where my index finger is pointing. William Jones's household is up here, and this map is roughly 1850. So it's right before the American Civil War period. And Jones, as Jocelyn already mentioned, enlists at a fairly advanced age. The typical American soldier in the Civil War was about 26. And so 45 puts him, nearly 20 years older than that typical soldier. And so we have a couple of other things. He's not obviously the only person from the region. We've got David Addison, Edward Augustus Croslier, Milo Freeland, John Harris, George Jarvis, William Jones, we've already mentioned, Nathaniel Johnson, Norman Johnson, Edward Moore, Henry Tucker, and Ira Waterman, all who joined the 54th Massachusetts, and they range in age from 18 to 45. That unit is recruited in early 1863. These individuals will go on to have a long veteran kind of experience. And I think the other point I would make here is that the aftermath of the war is part of the interesting story too. So I'll give you one more document here that those folks in the audience who joined us in February, you've seen this before. We talked a little bit about this. This is a copied list of the enlistees for the company that's raised here out of Sheffield. Now, this document, and Jim and Paul can correct me if I'm mistaken here, but is a copy that was done long after the fact. And so we did notice that there was a likely error in. So we see William Jones identified right here, and his unit is indicated, that's the 54th. And when we move over, we note that the copyist put down that he was identified as a laborer. But the other thing that they identified, from what record we're still unsure, is that he was killed November the 3rd, 1864. However, forward for a moment, this photograph, which is roughly 1900, this is William Jones right here. And we also know the death dates based on what is stated in the cemetery here in town. So he didn't die in 1864, and he comes back. He shows up in some other records, which we might come back to in a moment. But that connection then brings us from Worcester to Blandford to Sheffield and Pittsfield and the area, and it's just a pretty remarkable story, which, as Jocelyn pointed out, yeah, it's a family story, but it's more than that, and that's part of what we've been trying to do with this whole project. Right, is get at the point that these individual family stories have to be dug into and investigated to help fill in some of the blanks that we have. This photograph, just a brief other context, and then I'll be quiet here for a moment. Is this is an assembly of veterans. So these are Sheffield residents who were part of the so-called Grand Army of the Republic. This was a fraternal veterans organization founded in the years after the Civil War, when most of the men were getting towards advanced age. And in this particular image, we do have, as we said, William Jones here. We also have Augustus Croslear down here. And he was another resident who lived perhaps a mile or so from Jones within Sheffield. And the last thing I wanted to say about the GAR, so it met in a variety of locations across the United States, but members were usually equipped with a variety of different memorabilia. And so when we're looking at the kinds of things that they have on, this piece here is on their hats, basically. So it stands Grand Army of the Republic, it's a laurel leaf, and then they might also have this medal here, which has a symbol of the American flag and an eagle, and so on. And we can catch sight of that if we zoom in a bit here on, that's to remind me to stop talking. So most of them have these right here at the top of their hats, and we can see that William Jones's is basically right where my finger is pointing right there. And so, that's part of what we try to do is piece together, and you can switch back, Paul, sorry. We try to piece together all these different pieces of written evidence, photographs, material culture goods like the GRAR piece, the map that we took a look at, and then the work that you're doing over in genealogy to get together and figure out who are these folks. Other piece that I won't get up and get into, but we've looked at as well as the tax records. Tax record book, which is in front of me here, is from 1886 and shows us the valuation on the property and other real estate items that William Jones owned. So that's part of how we end up doing work of reconstructing folks' lives when we don't have letters or journals, or etc. We had the idea that we'd pause here for questions since my alarm went off and reminded me to do so. So I thought we could do that, and then Jocelyn has many more tales to tell. We've got yesterday's story to tell. We'll get there. But are there immediate questions, either from the space or out in the Zoom land? So we've got, yes, Smitty, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I find this fascinating. How were you able to identify Mr. Jones in that picture? Did you have other photographs or reference, or?
It's a good question. This is based on, somebody wrote down some time ago, the Grand Army of the Republic, post number 210, and identified each one of the individuals who were in that particular photograph. And so when we look at this, we see that they identified who is standing. That brings us back to William Jones here, who's standing in the background. And then in the front, confirming for us that E.A. Croslear is there as well. The hope is now, some of the GARs were organized a little bit earlier. This one's a little bit late, but it does show up in the Massachusetts GAR records, most of which are digitized at this point. You can see them when they go to encampments, big ones, sometimes in Boston, but for the most part, they gathered in their local spaces. Had somebody not written down, the names, to your point, it would have been a guess, basically. We have a sense, we do have another picture of, you don't have to, another picture of Croslear out in front of the stone store around the same time period-ish. And so that one would have helped us at least with guessing that one of the individuals in the larger photograph was probably him. But we didn't necessarily have, unless somebody again had done that work and written that down. Now, that said, it is a guess, right? Because we're basing it on that somebody wrote this down and that they got it right. And as we just saw with the previous copy, they didn't get right at some point that William Jones didn't survive the war. So a lot of the work is depending on, are folks gonna get things accurate? Go ahead, sorry.
So there is one piece I want to add that we discovered, and I don't think we told this to you. We found the actual document from the Adjutant General reporting to Sheffield that William Jones was killed. So we had always said maybe the town clerk mistranscribed
Right.
it, but it goes all the way back to the adjutant general. So
Right.
then
it's
we
even
looked
worse,
at the
yeah.
battle date and tried to find out where and what, and we could not match with anything of William Jones. And if you look at the Civil War records, there are a lot of William Joneses in the Civil War, my gosh.
Right.
And I think that's a good point, because a lot of your information is based on the source. And so, you know, in this case, it was either transcribed incorrectly but it was just on that document. Because I found that too, and I was thinking, oh gosh, is this not my William Jones? But then when you do more research, you see, no, because he is actually here in the 1870 census. And, you know, we know he had children and, you know, they were born after that date. So it really is about sort of almost double and triple checking your sources, or at least having multiple sources. But that's something for me, especially because it's still like almost unbelievable that this is my family connection. And I've done triple and quadruple checking and with all this information, because I want to be sure. But it's important, but sometimes things like that can throw you off.
And just, I know we have a question up on the screen, so I'll get to that in a moment. As a reminder, those of you again who joined us in February, we talked about how literally weeks before that February session, William Jones's stone was unfortunately damaged in a complete accident. The person had an incident and hit the headstone. And so we're in the process of getting that headstone remade. And eventually, once it's all set, we'll have a ceremony that will put it back in place. And the reenactors of the 54th Massachusetts.
Yes, they will.
Hey, folks, do
And 6 months of Apple One, all free on us. It's holiday everyday with Verizon.
Thank you. That's some great music. We had a question out there, and this is for Jocelyn, so I'll get you for this. But the question really is, what inspired you to begin your genealogy journey, and what's been the most surprising or interesting discovery that you've had so far?
Honestly, what started was when both my mother passed away in 97. I can see my brother's face right here. It's making me smile. My father passed away in 2002. And it was after that, I mean, he found this record a long time, you know, obviously prior. And there was just something that stuck with me, thinking like, why did he find this? And did he find this for a reason? And so, you know, with the advent of Ancestry and being able to go online, I was like, well, I'll just put it in and see what happens. And quite honestly, each name and each hint was like, oh my gosh, like another person. Like it was amazing to have like, you know, identified direct ancestors. And to answer your question about the most surprising thing, it is absolutely Jethro. I mean, to know that he was born around 1733. The earliest document that we have was from around 1757, I believe, where he is listed as free. When he and my grandmother, Judy, were married in Wrentham in 1767, they were both listed as free. And that to me is the most surprising, like that, you know, he is my backstop, but I don't know, I still haven't been able to go beyond that, but finding him has literally soothed my soul and really changed me. Really, it has.
I wonder, Elizabeth, do you have comments? I mean, you do so much of this work. I know Jim does too. Do either of you have comments you want to add to the journey, the trip that people go on with these, or?
No, I mean, Jocelyn's joy in finding all of this is just really infectious. And, you know, I think that looking at history, you know, you don't get the sense of how your people moved through history, and that's what she's finding. She's really, and so it's been fascinating and just fun to be along for them.
Right.
I take great satisfaction in her enthusiasm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a pleasure. We went out this morning driving around Sheffield and every place we stopped, there was excitement and
Grabbing rocks, and taking rocks back,
Right.
go back home.
spreading flowers.
I would really say, I'm really excited about this project that, you know, you've got this grant that you're undertaking this work. And I would encourage anybody who is connected to anyone who is African American or who's been a part of this community for a long time or encourage anybody who's been African American to connect with these guys, to really look into your family tree. Don't be afraid. Quite honestly, the joy that the potential that is there for you to potentially find, I feel is greater than the fear of any backstop. It really has just been something I never thought could be possible, and I understand that a lot of people think the same way. But I'd say, call me. If you're afraid, if you don't even know how to start, like I can help, you know, give you advice. These guys can give you advice. But reach out, because this, again, is too important. This is really a story about humanity. It's about humans being good to one another and honoring, again, sort of the traditions and the history and the culture that we really do all share. I mean, if you think about, you know, Sheffield being what I think it's 3,600 population. And sort, I don't know what that was, maybe 200 years ago, but you know, and the Black population was probably about 1%. And if you think about that, what is that? I can't think of doing math right now, but basically it's such a small group, but they were here. And they were also connected to one another, and they supported one another. They married one another. There are so many connections between the names. You know, Milo Friedland was married to one of Jethro's granddaughters. I can't even remember who else. There's so many Johnsons, Fields, like there's all these names that are Sheffield names of these, you know, these families. And as I build the sort of like the connections to them all, it brings them to life. And I feel like even just noting their names, just like marking like a document that's a birth certificate, a marriage certificate, is one step closer to sort of making it right. They're making their existence right and bringing it to light, which is really what fuels me.
We have other questions, so please, yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking about, your family, and so far, we've only heard they've all lived in the north. And I wonder how they got there in the very beginning in the 1700s.
Right,
And none of your family so far has been a slave in the slaves.
right, yeah.
order.
And at least not from this strain, which again is the Joneses. And I find that just to be amazing. I don't know how that came to be. I still, you know, there's so many more documents to go through and, you know, to sort of understand it. I think part of it also is there is an indigenous line that comes through here.
Mhm.
And so I know that there is, you know, we have been here since, you know, long before, you know, people came and colonized this land. So it's still a history that's waiting to be discovered, but I couldn't be happier to do that too.
I wonder if you might also talk a little bit about one of the other aspects of Jethro Jones. So he's the person we know a lot about increasingly as you've been digging in. And one of the things that you hinted at when you were introducing him is, in addition to being a veteran of multiple wars, Jones was also a really well-regarded toolmaker and a person whose work is collected. It's not just about that he's admired for the work he did, but rather that people look for a Jones kind of tool. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure. A few years ago, I had someone reach out to me through Ancestry, who is an antiquarian from New York. And he and I think his grandfather was the first who collected Jethro's pieces. Jethro made planes, sort of, you know, big kind of wooden planes that would actually shape sort of, you know, molding and things like that. And he reached out to me to see what I knew about Jethro, if I had any of his pieces. And I said, wait, what are you talking? I knew he was part of the Continental. I didn't know this part of him. I didn't know about his tool making skills. And he let me know of this community of antique tool collectors that have really done a lot of research into Jethro. They've published scholarly articles. They've have reached out and told me that they have connections at the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia, and that they've had conversations about potentially being able to talk about his craft and his skill, and that amongst them, they have about 20 of Jethro's pieces that they could bring together for an actual exhibit. I've never seen one in person. It's really my dream to be able to hold one in my hands, because he has his name, it's I Jones, that's on the side. Apparently that's, I don't know, it's definitely his, even though it says I don't know why they did that, but it's definitely his. And last year, actually, and I'm gutted that I wasn't able to see it, but there was a display and a demonstration down, an exhibit, sorry, at Colonial Williamsburg about Jethro as well as Caesar Cheller, and their skills, and they talked, and Colonial Williamsburg actually acquired one of his pieces. And just one other thing, just that also sort of surprised me, back to that other question, is at the time that I learned about this, I did a Google search, and there was one of Jethro's pieces that was going up for auction, and they were estimating that it would sell for between $800 and $1,200, and it sold for $4,500. Like, that's crazy. So yeah, so there, and this is like a whole aspect of his life and his skill that, again, I still don't know.
Well, where was he living when he was doing this?
So originally he was in,
Right?
yes, so Holliston, oh gosh.
So Holliston's, for those of you unfamiliar with the other part of Massachusetts, Holliston is right below Framingham. So it's in the southern end of Middlesex County, but pretty close to Worcester. He lived in Worcester, Leicester.
Yes.
It's married in Rentham.
Yeah.
Which is by Foxborough, just to give you some other context. No comments about the other residents of Foxborough. But anyway, yeah, Eagle fan here. Anyway, but the so if he was in Holliston when he was making some of these, then he enlists out of Worcester County, and then he ends up in Blandford, and then the children come here. So we see this movement across, southern New England, basically. And is it the tool making that gets in? We were talking about this yesterday. We don't. It's speculation at this point, but go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's great. I mean, that's what I was going to say. It's sort of like this migration pattern. That's part of like what I'm hoping to discover, sort of coming from all the way, Medway, Holliston, and then being in Blandford for a while. And then, the family moved, or several family members moved to Sheffield, some moved to Pittsfield. We're thinking about maybe it was regarding job opportunities, industry. But, Jethro was a farmer towards the end. Chauncey, who was my second great grandfather, is somewhere noted as like the first Black farmer in Pittsfield. William was a farmer as well. Anyway, this is all sort of information that we understand a little bit piecemeal, but I want to understand sort of the full story and how it fits into the shape of the community in general at the time. So.
Were they all landowners?
Yes, actually, yeah. And that's something that I found as I was doing my research, that was something that was unique in that the way they passed down their land as well. And I guess how I don't know how they came to have the money to be able to do this. And again, that's part of the story that I really hope to uncover. So.
We were talking a little bit yesterday about Jethro Jones, and so, it's his descendants that come here to Sheffield, but Jethro is a landowner in Blandford. The road that we walked up yesterday to explore the space where he would have been working and living and so on, is today quite remote. Yeah, I mean, Blandford's remote, right? But, but it's, as we came down, south, off the connecting road, leaving the space yesterday, we noted perhaps, maybe 5 residents, I suppose, between where we were at Jones Road and Route 23. One of the homes that's up on the left quite soon after you head south is either a Federalist or Georgian construction. So that house has been there for quite some time. But there is nothing left of any kind of standing structure on Jones Road itself.
There was a Jones in Otis.
Yeah, oh, that's another city, another town where
Is that a
Joneses
different
moved
Jones?
to. I know that my Joneses were definitely in Otis, they were.
Because I
Lee,
sold the Jones
Lanesboro.
house in Otis.
Oh, really?
On Jones Road. Across from, you know, the, egg people.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Down, down and it goes up and it's dead end and there's a big colonial up there.
See, now, this is wonderful because little bits of information like this can help us piece together or because sometimes, you know, we're assuming because it seems like 75% chance that or likelihood that this is them or 80%. But little stories and little bits of information like that really help us paint a picture because Otis is definitely part of the trade, definitely.
You need to move here.
I know.
We're done.
I found the bit of property today that I love. Williams land. Oh my
So you
gosh.
did see the land, okay.
Yes.
So, just to give a little bit more context to the land that, she went out to, this is the big storybook for me, so I'm gonna read towards the night before Christmas. But, William Jones, this is again 1886, and he's listed here. And so it indicates a couple of things about him. So he owns a horse. The horse is valued at a particular amount, in this case, $30. There is a house listed, and the value of the buildings, not including the land, are listed at $150. And he's got 2 acres of land, the value of which is $50. And so when you take the aggregate of the real estate, it comes up to $200. Again, this 1880s time frame. And my progressive lenses are killing me right now. Anyway, it's not too close. But anyway, so the total tax that he would have paid would have been approximately $5.30 based on a variety of things. So that's real estate, livestock, and the fact that he was a resident. Everybody paid, if you were an adult person who owned property, you would pay some kind of fee just because you were living in the community. Big difference from 50 years earlier when Hekeliah would have arrived, where the other thing you would have paid is also a fee for the church. Everybody who lived in town had to pay to upkeep the church. That was until, in Massachusetts anyway, until the late 1820s or early 1830s. Connecticut, it went a little bit longer. And so, you know, I mean, it's documents like this that just give us a sense of, well, there it is. And I forgot the cow, sorry. He also owned a cow, which was valued at a higher rate than the, depending how one reads this, could have been valued at slightly higher than a horse. Unless this person's making a weird curly Q 0, it looks like the cow is worth $36 and the horse is worth 30. So, you know, when you look at texts like this, that's what helps us get a sense of people's property, the mapping, identifying a lot of these maps, identifying where people live, where families live. That's how we're able to combine a lot of this information. And then the harder part, as you've experienced, is when you get into sort of what else did they do? You were able to find, for example, the pension record. So, okay, so he served in the Revolutionary War. He's got, and I'm talking about Jethro Jones here for a moment. He's got a pension. William Jones enters the record with a little bit broader story because of the property ownership, because of the century, frankly. I mean, the record keeping is simply different and a little bit more detailed as we get into this. And the other point I wanted to raise is just that, you know, when we were looking at Jones Road yesterday, what we were going to look for was something we we knew was there, but we didn't know where precisely it was. And Paul was kind enough to stumble across it, because some of us, me, did not listen to my GPS device, which would have told me exactly where it was. But anyway, there is a burying ground along Jones Road that is suspected to be the resting place not only for the Jones family who stayed in Blandford, those who didn't move here to Sheffield, but also for other local residents, the Tracy family, for example. And so we were able to find fairly, once we got into the right space, pretty easily, we were able to find the Tracy stones, one of which is extant and is really quite detailed and so on.
Flat.
Laying flat in the ground, not upright. But with some exploration and some help from particularly Jim and Paul using the, what do we give them the technical name, the long pokey things. We were able to identify some spots that clearly felt like they were things to take a look at. So, and what we uncovered were a series of field stones that have been noted by other folks who've been out there. The Hilltown hikers have been up there and have led us to the spot. Yeah, we'll have Paul shift over for a sec here and use the document camera. So this will be a camera of a camera, but
Not so good, huh?
oh no, hold on. I can
Yeah.
play around with this a little bit. Hold on.
Well,
Well, go ahead.
You're
You-
doing that, I
you
just want to
explain.
explain because this was.
Oh, there you go.
This was
Oh,
an amazing,
Oh,
amazing
that's
moment. I feel like this was like
Yeah,
probably the greatest moment of my life.
the shape of
honestly.
the stone is.
This is in Blandford,
In Blandford on Jones.
it's on Jones Road. And
Never find it.
It's not marked.
No, it's not Mark's.
we walked about a mile up this road and this is real, it's so emotional. It took me a while actually for it to sink in last night, but we walked up this hill and it was, you know, I know we were all so sore and tired afterwards, but it's like, I have no idea if we're gonna find it, but I want to at least try while I'm here. And you know, so we're looking around and I learned how to identify different trees, because as I admit, I don't know how to identify trees. I know what a birch tree and
Yeah,
white
yeah,
birch,
yeah.
yes.
No, look, that's
And we were on the wrong side, but we were all kind of spread out looking around and they had their pokey things and I was just picking up sticks. And at one point, Paul said to me, if you sit on the stone and the spirits will tell you or will guide you to where they are. And he said that at one point and I said, oh, well, I'm gonna sit on this stone here. And I found the stones on the wrong side of the road, but that's okay. Because about 5-10 minutes later, we hear Paul screaming, look. And so we all went running because we found the birch tree that we were looking for. That was the marker for William Trace, for the
Yeah,
Tracy family.
Tracy Giles. Tracy.
One. And so I did not know how to identify what to look for because the layers of the leaves are, I mean, it's so thick, it's ridiculous. And I was thinking everything was gonna be flat. So as we're standing there looking around, I just all of a sudden looked and I saw this bit of stone that was sticking up and I was like, wait, what's that? And I went and I kind of, you know, I called Paul over and I said, you know, wiped it. I'm like, could this be something? And he's like, oh, I don't know. And he's like, well, it could be. And then we got the pokey thing and we could feel that there were more pieces there and there were more and I said, I know this is it. I know this is it. And Heather, I gotta give it to Heather. She grabbed that shovel and just like was digging. We dug up some stones that were there. We were not sure if they were other markers or if they were like, you know, sort of places where people could sit when they sat and visited, but it was absolutely clear that there were at least 2 there and it was, again, it was like, it was cold. It had been a long day. I drove up yesterday, so it was exhausting. But when I got back home and back to the place where I was staying last night and it hit me like, I cannot believe that we found them.
No, out of all the stones and all.
All this, I mean, and we were thinking that, at least I was thinking things were gonna be flat, but the way the stone stood up was just like, we need to look at that.
The other one.
And-
In the background, if I can interrupt for 1 second, this is the other stone, which is why Jocelyn just mentioned, we were thinking we were gonna have to be looking for these, so where my finger's pointing on the screen. That's literally flat in the ground, it's quite a detailed stone, it's got the sort of weeping willow at the top, and you know, very classic for the time period when it was constructed. He is, I believe Tracy dies in 1833. And Jocelyn reminded me that it was about, you can switch back, Paul, sorry, but
Can you read
It's like-
this down?
Oh, yes.
That's
Tracy's-
Tracy's Jones, but
Tracy's
not,
stone you
not
can
the
read.
other. not the other.
And
Yeah.
what we expected, because the Hilltown hikers had indicated that there were field stones. Basically slate or some other kind of piece that would probably not be marked, and none of the ones that we uncovered were indeed marked. But the shape of them, the position, the location, you know, it all fed to the circumstantial evidence we had to suggest that this was the, you know, an extended part of the burying ground. And it's, yeah, it is I mean, you know, I'm not related, I'm
Yeah,
emotional
you are.
about it, so.
You are.
You gotta say. So it's a very, a very moving experience, yeah, really, and it was,
Just hearing about it.
you know, it was a great journey to do together, obviously. And really, you know, have to help, and thanks to everybody who helped, you know, find this space. Including the groups who had been there, just about 2 years earlier, I believe, the Hilltown hikers had been and indicated where it was, and I've spoken with two of them about it. So I knew I knew where roughly to be, and I've sent the coordinates, and it was just dopey me not reading my GPS thing properly that caused us to have to delay about half an hour while we were wandering in the woods. It's really not that, but it isn't marked, it's not on maps, I mean, I guess you'd say it's maybe 0.8 of a mile northeast of the North Lanford Cemetery, which is a quite large cemetery on Blair Road.
You didn't want to mark it, so you can go up.
It's got enough of a thing, you know, so there are some, what's the word, or Heather, help me out, thank you, surveyor's tape, yeah. There are a couple of pieces of surveyor's tape.
Boundary tape, yes.
Or boundary tape, yeah, that are up, which we of course missed completely on our first pass. So, but now we know, you know.
There's no beach trees over here.
Birch trees.
Birch trees, it's all
Yeah,
beach,
it's
that's
all
it.
beach.
But I
Still be alive.
what's that?
Oh, it's not the same.
Oh, no, it was
It was
just,
just from 2 years ago, when the Hilltop hikers went out, they had some photographs of their location.
of the Tracy
Yeah.
marker, the big one
Yeah.
that was flat. They had found that, no one had found this other one
Right.
the others that were there
Right.
actually. But one of the things that I want to say is just that I never would have been able to find this on my own. Even if I, you know, been able to go directly to that mark, I never would have been able to find it. And the fact that once we sort of like found it and everyone just jumped in and just started like digging and like. And I was so exhausted, I was just like, I can't, it was like something came over me, like, no, you sit, you let these guys go. But they did, and it was like their hands were in like the dirt, the earth. Like nobody, like when was the last time anybody cared about them? Had their hands in that dirt, you know? And that's really what really moved me. And as I went to bed last night and I was thinking, you said, oh, I'm not family. I was like, these people are family. Like, I really do feel like it was like passing on the baton, you know. I don't have children of my own. My brothers have children of his own. And I feel like my job here is to help bring these folks to life. To help people know who they were, but pass that along to others so that they can sort of, you know, build upon that and continue to share it. And that's really what happened. And so I will always and forever be like connected to them because it was honestly the most amazing thing to happen in my life.
And we have Veterans Day coming up, and
Yeah.
there was a man who served how many times?
Right.
Exactly.
Two major wars for the both in the colonial war and then in the Revolutionary War. And I on that very point, we have the documentation on Jethro Jones' service. And their child, Giles Tracy, who is just maybe 10 feet away, is also a Revolutionary veteran.
Oh.
His marker does have the DAR indication, you know, that he's
That's an old name over there.
and so we're gonna put in for that to get one for Jethro Jones to be placed there as well. And that's the kind of work too that, you know, this happens in a lot of different places. A lot of people you know, are in, as we know, unmarked graves, and so, you know, the work to uncover this happens all across the country in both little and big ways. I know we only have like 2 minutes,
Can I just say
so,
one last
oh
thing
yeah,
just about that?
before final questions.
No,
go,
just
yeah.
one last thing,
Yeah.
just because I, as I started talking about you guys, I forgot to say that I actually am a member of the DAR,
Alright.
thanks to Jethro Jones. Last year I was accepted into membership, so I'm a member of the Flag House chapter at Betsy Ross House in Philadelphia. I'm so honored, and they're a wonderful group. But I'm also an associate member of the Colonel Bigelow chapter in Worcester. I still have to send in my renewal, so if anyone from here is like saying, yes, I'm going to renew. But it's through these organizations that I want to reach out to be able to get an official marker for Jethro out there. And I didn't realize that Tracy was a part of it too, but you know, I feel like, you know, having unearthed this, we now have the momentum and the people that can help us actually memorialize them properly.
So like I said, we have like 1 to 2 minutes or so. Other questions? We have thumbs up from the brothers, so there we go. Any questions from, we've asked a lot of the keeping room, but anybody out in the audience?
Can I unmute everybody all at once?
Try it.
You could. Yeah,
Maybe we
I would encourage people to use the raise hand feature. They have a question.
Your brothers
Or
and
put it in the chat.
He lives in.
Or put it in the chat.
Maryland.
Or put it in.
Connecticut.
No, Maryland.
Maryland, same
State.
Maryland.
Oh, Maryland.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I have one comment I'd like to make for everyone. This is a mass humanities grant. This entire process, and Jocelyn's family has opened up so many opportunities for us to explore the other families, and we call them the anchor families or the key families in town. And as we discover the ancestry associated with the Arnold family, or Crosler family, or the Moore family, and all of those, we're trying to take the same sort of approach that Jocelyn has in uncovering these families. At the end of the day, this is the second in the Keeping Room series on this project, and we'll probably have 1 or 2 more. But at the end of the day, the goal and objective of the grant is to take and make panels similar to the one in the corner here behind Beth. They'd be 3 by 4 foot panels with all of the information of the different families and research. And these would be traveling panels. So they go to different schools and libraries, much like those of you who locally know the Stockbridge Muncie Mohegan exhibit that we have put out throughout there. So this would be the same sort of idea, and that's one of the outcomes. And I think Jocelyn said it best, and Bernie Drew said it before Jocelyn at the end of Bernie Drew's book. He said, Bernie said, you know, probably 10 or 15 years ago, maybe, that he wrote that book. He said at the end of his book, he said, and now I leave it to the next group of historians to take my work. And so Bernie's work is what we've been working off of. And Jocelyn mentioned yesterday that the next group of people will take it from us. This is a story that doesn't end. And we just keep finding more branches. And as the technology becomes available and we can find these documents, I don't know how you would have done this 20 years ago, you know. So.
Yes, please.
I just, I was curious, how many, this is sort of directed at Jim. How many Black families were here in the 1700s and how many are here now?
Well, in the 1800 census, there were, I think, 200 Black, about 200 listed. And I forgot, I calculated the percentage that was of the population. I can't remember what I came up with, but I think it was around 5 or 6 or 8, 7%. Now there's virtually, it's way less than that.
Yeah.
There were more Blacks, incidentally, this is, I think, an interesting thing. There were more Blacks in Sheffield in the 1800 census than there was in the entire Berkshire County.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, and did they mostly live over on, in an enclave like, or were they?
here's down the area, most of them were in the.
Yeah, Berkshire School Road.
They
Yeah.
were two schools were.
But we do know there was the Anthony family lived on County Road where Ewan Street branches off in that area.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Jones family lived on West Road, which is not part of the New Guinea
No.
enclave.
We had one family on Sheffield, on Salisbury Road.
Oh,
Well,
Johnson's,
totally.
Johnson's,
The Johnsons.
yeah,
Oh, they're not here.
no.
I think a lot of these, that era, the fifties, so they went through high school and a lot of them did go to college and on further and left the area, like the Jacksons. I don't know where Mabel Johnson went, but she's deceased now. But, and I think, the Jackson daughter's deceased. I don't know where.
I never knew a Jackson.
Yeah, Jackson's lived on Salisbury. Berkshire.
I have many Jacksons in the database, but I never personally knew any of them here.
You know,
Johnson's I did.
quite a few in high school.
Johnson's I did.
And that happened in Lakeville too, the children moved away.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some of what you're talking about mirrors a lot of what happens in rural America, across the country, right? That individuals really move out of space for any number of reasons. And that's part of what makes reconstructing some of the history so challenging. But it is the work that, as Paul reminds us, you know, that the grant is centered on. We're focused on right in the sort of sweet spot here of Jethro Jones' children arriving here and William Jones's experience, because we're examining 1780 to about 1920. But obviously that story extends both before and beyond those timeframes. I want to thank everybody for being here and thank especially Jocelyn for coming and sharing her experience. And I will, did you have final words or?
No, this is wonderful. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for being part of this. I think this is a continuation of a very long research project that we will continue doing. And hopefully have you back.
You'll have to keep us somehow informed of what you discover.
Well, she's gonna buy a house up here.
Yeah, exactly.
That's available.
We're looking out.
We should have down payment on collectively.
I'll rely on you to send them.
This was a sort of- Find out.
You can visit the Samuel Harrison House in Pittsfield.
Not yet, no.
So thank you to everyone out there and we will wrap things up.